I think I'm going to have a word with Google. It's absurd. What a privilege it is for me to be here. IMPAC5, yay. Some of you I know were present at IMPAC1 in Geelong in 2005. That was largely the brainchild of someone, I hope you're listening from out there somewhere, Graham Kelleher. Graham Kelleher is in Australia, where that first IMPAC was conducted. He's an engineer, a civil engineer, and he says that's an oxymoron. But he's more than civil. He's a visionary. He was the first person to have the responsibility of looking after the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority when it began in 1975. I met him that year. Think about the world in 1975, not long after the results of that first image of Earth from space in 1968. 1970s, a revolutionary time of changing the way we humans think about ourselves on this blue canoe, this pale blue dot that holds everything and everyone that we care about in a universe that's really not very friendly. It's beautiful looking up at the stars at night, but it's not friendly. This planet Earth is our only home, really. So the idea of protecting the Great Barrier Reef as a park, when it started, only 3% was highly or fully protected. To the point that you heard today, we're talking of a coastline of more than 1,000 kilometers designated as a park, but a very small portion was actually safe for the creatures who live there, the fish, the shrimp, the lobsters, all the things, the coral reefs. It was a good start. It's kind of where we are today. It's a good start. We now have about 3% of the ocean highly or fully protected. We are aspiring to have 10 times that by 2030. That too is a good start. The truth is, we have to think about the ocean, think about nature, primarily as our life support system, filled with all these bits and pieces, all the other forms of life, millions of creatures that make our existence possible. They are in the canoe too. In fact, it's operated by them. We're passengers, but we are not very mindful passengers about what keeps the boat afloat, the canoe moving safely through the universe. So, from Geelong in 2005 to Washington, D.C. in 2009, Marseille, 2013, then Chile in 2017. And here we are. Where are we, in fact, from the time of the first International Marine Protected Area Congress, when really we began to focus on the importance of the ocean? Why did it take us so long? When you think about how in the 20th century, from a time when it was okay to take wild birds by the ton, by the truckload for commercial markets, it seemed infinite. Passenger pigeons, you could not possibly eliminate them except that we did. A long history of humankind, our species, that would be all of us. You know, we're really good at using nature. We call it natural resources. If something can't be used or eaten, we think of that as wasteland or something that needs to be, quotes, developed. It's not useful unless we can find a market for it or a way that we can apply it to our benefit. But what we are finally getting through our really brilliant minds is the biggest thing we take from nature, the most important thing, is our existence. You can't sell it, you can't weigh it, you can't put numbers on it. Well, you can. There are now 8 billion of us. At the cost of nature, of the billions of other creatures who've made our existence, our prosperity, possible. We're finally beginning to face up to the limits of how many of us can Earth support and still have not just livelihoods, but life itself is on the line. We can see that the very systems that maintain our existence are reaching tipping points. And we're finally getting there where we say, no, we need to have turning points. We need to put into our everyday thinking, starting when we're kids, we learn our ABCs, we learn our numbers, we have to take care of nature, the systems, the living systems that make our existence possible. So, I want to show you a few images, and I want to start with the one of a creature. Could we have that first image, please? A creature who, if we brought it back from some distant part of the universe, what would be our first inclination? To worry? Is it going to eat us? Whoop. Or can we eat it? We would probably be in awe if we saw a creature like this coming from somewhere else in the universe. Actually, they're here. It's a part of our universe. One of many variations on the theme of invertebrates with big brains, well, lots of little brains actually in their assorted arms. Cephalopods. We're just beginning to know them as something other than just a meal or a curiosity. We have new ways, armed with the traditional knowledge, the new knowledge that comes because we have the technology to take us to places that we are now able to see with new eyes. To see this place, this blue miracle in that larger universe. To get up in the sky, to fly high in the sky, and look back on Earth. That has been the gift of my lifetime, and yours too. Our predecessors could not know what Earth looked like from space. Even the smartest people who ever lived prior to the 1960s, prior to 1950s, Einstein, really intelligent, smart human being, but he did not know what the kids of today grow up with knowing. That perspective. Astronauts come back transformed from that experience, and they want to tell everybody, you've got to see what Earth is like. I want to share what I know. And yet, that's just the view from the top. Getting beneath the surface to know what the ocean is like, our life support system that we've learned in the past half-century, mostly, that the ocean drives climate and weather, shapes planetary chemistry, holds most of life on Earth. The greatest diversity, the greatest abundance of life is under the surface, and most of it lives in the dark all of the time because our access gets down to about, maybe 30 meters, 50 meters as a diver, breathing compressed air or some exotic mixes of gas. But to actually know the ocean, you have to go deep. And you have to stay long. Jane Goodall spent years living in Gombe, getting to know one species, chimpanzees. Does Jane Goodall eat chimpanzees? No. But people who look at the ocean first think, is it going to eat me? Big sharks and things. Or can I eat it? We have this habit of thinking about, can we use it, whatever it is? But when you have a chance to stay in one place for a while, like the people who live in a place for 14,000 years, the culture of getting to really deeply understand who you are and where you've come from and how you have to respect the world around you if you're going to survive. Living underwater has given some of us an opportunity, not like Jane Goodall, but certainly an opportunity, spending days, weeks, days, nights, getting to know the individual creatures who live in the neighborhood as something more than a product. Getting to see deeper by using technologies that enable us, humans, to go where humans have not been able to go before, except on one-way trips to the bottom of the ocean. That's not what I consider a successful mission. But now hundreds, even thousands of people can come back like astronauts. They're witnesses to the nature of life below the surface, below the sunlit portion, getting down into the deep sea. That layer of life that moves up and down in the ocean. Maybe the largest migration of life on the planet, right at the edge of light, filled with creatures. Well, this is a creature, an actually very special creature. He's the Minister of the Environment for Ecuador, Gustavo remember his name in a minute. Gustavo had a chance to use a little submarine for the first time last July. An opportunity. He, who had jurisdiction as Minister of the Environment over the Galapagos Islands, among other things. But he'd never been deep. He's a diver, but not deep. So this was his chance. He was a little apprehensive, but he took the plunge. And when he did, had an encounter. This is not an encounter that is like over days or weeks, but just that moment when a big mola came and whispered into his ear, transformed his perspective about the ocean, who lives there, creatures who are curious, creatures who have faces, creatures who have lives, part of the system that most people don't think about when they think about the Galapagos Islands. Access to the sea, like access to the skies above, and to places all over the planet where humans have not been able to get to until right about now, give us opportunities to learn, opportunities to exploit. We have a choice. What's it going to be? To take, as we have throughout all of our history, consuming nature to foster our prosperity, or to understand that, yes, we have to take from nature, all creatures do, but we have really almost worn out our welcome here on Earth because of the level of consumption that now 8 billion people are imposing on the systems. I want to democratize access to the sea. I want all of you to be able to hop into a Hertz Rent-A-Sub, or whatever it is. Have one in your own garage. Take off into the ocean with a system so simple to drive that even a scientist can do it. If I can, you can. Or you can go with a driver if you wish. But whatever, it's time that we actually understand the nature of the ocean, not just rocks and water. It's alive. It shapes planetary chemistry. Life in the ocean shapes climate. Life in the ocean makes our existence, the existence of all creatures on this planet, land and sea together, possible. Their history in the ocean goes back literally billions of years. Our history, well, however long you wish to measure it, our ancestors go back very early. I mean, we're looking at some in this picture. The genetic makeup of them and us has some remarkable consistency. The same chemicals that make up phytoplankton and zooplankton make up humans. We're a part of all of this amazing splendor of this matrix, this fabric of life. And we need to do our part to keep it safe. So it takes a lot of little guys, phytoplankton, Prochlorococcus, one of the heavy lifters, generating about 20% of the oxygen in the atmosphere, but going way back to at least 2 billion years ago, doing the heavy lifting. Trees matter, of course. Moss, ferns, all the green stuff on the land, but it's the ocean. It's where it started. It's the ocean that continues to be the engine that drives animal life. We don't photosynthesize. It's really frustrating that we don't. Think of how much we could get away with if we could just photosynthesize. But to at least be mindful of the cost that we impose on the planet by our existence. And it's what Dan Pauly has been looking at. What are the costs? How much are we consuming? How much can we save in order to have enough for us to prosper? The creatures, many of them, I dare say in the ocean, probably most of them are yet to be discovered, are yet to be given names. After all, we've only observed maybe as much as 10% of the ocean. We've mapped maybe as much as 20%, as deeply, as successfully as we have the land and moon, Mars, Jupiter. The ocean is still largely unknown, but it is not unexploited. We have the capacity in the 21st century to go deep, to take whatever is there. If we don't see an immediate use for it, it is simply discarded as bycatch, as trash fish, as underutilized perhaps. We have to figure out how can we use the creatures there if we haven't already done so. Otherwise, what good are they? I can imagine the fish asking that question of us. What good are humans anyway? But we ask it of them all the time. What good is this? You see something new. We have to somehow put a value on it. I love diving in the midst of a place where the food chain is in action and trying not to be part of the food chain. But actually, humans are safe in the ocean from the predation of creatures who have rhythms, habits. You see, everybody's having a good time there except the little fish in the middle of that bait ball, as we call it. And dolphins, birds, tuna, sharks. We're able to witness this and make the connection between food chains in the ocean, the generation of oxygen, the capturing of carbon, putting it on the balance sheet when it comes to climate. Just in time, maybe, the ocean is being accounted for as the biggest carbon sink. I mean, it's where the carbon is, it's where life is. 97% of the biosphere is ocean, three-dimensional, as you heard at the very beginning. This is our planet, this is our home. We are armed with the most important tool for our survival, now known as knowledge. That superpower that sets us apart from all previous generations. The traditional knowledge that we are beginning to incorporate and respect, coupled with the new knowledge that gives us unprecedented perspective. Knowing more about who we are, where have we come from, and maybe where are we going in the future. As sea level rises, our homes, along with the homes of creatures in the sea, are changing. Ice is melting. We assist that with our icebreakers that take large chunks of ice and break them up into small chunks of ice, opening black water, or at least dark water, enabling sunlight to be absorbed, warming even faster. We are beginning to really, for the first time, put on the balance sheet our impact. And it would be terrible if we did not know about life in the ocean, terrible if we did not understand the importance of the creatures deep in the sea, those who come and spend some time on the land, polar bears, walruses, that are at risk because of us. We say, oh, it's climate that's causing the problem. Well, who's causing the climate problem? We need to look in the mirror and understand. This, as was said in some of the earlier opening remarks, we're facing global issues, but it's individual action that is needed to make progress from decline, tipping points, to turning points. I tell kids who are really concerned, and they should be, about the state of the world, what can I do? I'm just one little kid. And I have to say, as I do to every kid who asks, and I'll say to any of you who ask, what have you got? What have you got? What's your superpower? You're different from every other human who's ever been. You've got something that you love, something you can do, something that you're good at, or that you want to be good at. But whatever it is, put it to work. I heard President Obama remark that our highest priority must be to keep the world safe for our children. And he was thinking guns and things, but hey, the phrase is a good one. Our highest priority must be, as generations of humans have done in the past, but now with the more serious challenges facing us and the kids of today, how are we going to keep the world safe? We can make policies, we can have laws, we can look in the mirror. What can you do today? What can any of us do? But we first need to know what to do. Polar bears can't solve the problem. They may realize the world is in trouble. They're in trouble. Polar areas are especially at risk from one end of the planet to the other. We can see that there's change. Change. Well, there's always change, but change at a pace and change in directions that are cause for concern, but they're also cause for hope. Because if we did not know, that would be the worst problem of all. But we've got to face up to it. Coral reefs, in my lifetime, as a witness, about half have disappeared in the sunlit waters. We haven't made yet quite as much of an impact in the deep sea because we are just beginning to seriously take on the deep sea, the high seas, where deep coral reefs, deep populations, where most of life on Earth actually lives. We have been witnesses, though, to climate change. Again, look in the mirror, who's causing it? And seeing the victims. Coral bleaching. It's a reality. But imagine if we didn't know. Imagine if we continued to not worry about the fate of kelp forests. They, like plankton, like other seaweeds, like the trees, like all green things, photosynthetic organisms, continue to generate oxygen, continue to capture carbon, while so many are looking for technical fixes to the climate issue to capture carbon. we are destroying the best mechanisms that have ever come along. Photosynthesis. Sea otters cannot save the kelp. We're the answer. We're the problem, but we're the solution. We know what to do. Now, nobody can do it all, but everybody can do something. That's the key. Seagrasses, mangroves, heavy lifters in terms of capturing carbon, generating oxygen, providing home and sustenance for legions of small creatures, many who have yet to be named by us. I'm sure they know who they are. We're just beginning to explore on a basis that gives us some better understanding of the nature of the world. And just as we get to the point of understanding, not everybody looks at the Earth with the kind of dignity and respect and love that we really must emphasize if we are to succeed. Back in 1872, or between 1872 and 76, with a Challenger expedition, scientists first discovered in the deep sea these strange, this rubble-like stuff on the ocean floor. When analyzed, it turns out they're loaded with various metals, mostly iron, some manganese. They're called manganese nodules. But there's also a whole range of other metals. When asked back in the 1800s, what are they good for? Nobody had an answer. Nobody could really get to them, and it's still difficult, but since they occur in depths from about, well, in some cases, fairly shallow water, like 1,000 meters below where you can snorkel, but deep, shallow as compared to the average depth of the ocean, which is 4,000 meters. Really deep if you consider the not so deep if you consider the maximum depth of 11,000 meters. And only about as many people who have been to the moon have so far managed to get to the deepest part of the ocean. Very few witnesses to be able to come back and say, you've got to see it, you have to understand, the ocean is alive. Okay, now 21st century, just as in the 1980s, there began to be an interest in manganese nodule because finally we could figure out what to do with them. Crack them open, distill out the metals that are there. We need the lithium, we need the cobalt, we need the nickel. And we don't need so much of the rest, so we can just throw that away. It's like the bycatch. You just take what you want, and the rest is discarded. It's a real problem. If you haven't tuned in to the issues around deep sea mining, please do so. There is, in fact, a petition going around right now, Indigenous Voices for a Ban on Deep Sea Mining, www.blueclimateinitiative.org. Check it out. And check out a film that will be made available this afternoon, I think around 11:30, here at the conference called Deep Rising, about the conditions that now are just right for putting vast amounts of money into mining the deep sea. Okay, if you think they're just dead rocks out there, if you think the ocean is just rocks and water, you wouldn't be all that concerned. We need lithium, right? We need cobalt. We need all these things that we think we need to power our new civilization, to address climate change. But there's an illusion that these are just dead rocks waiting to be scooped up to serve us, humans. They're alive. They're bacterial action that makes it possible for the accretion of the metals around something organic, like a shark's tooth, like the ear bone of a whale, or a chip of a mollusk, something organic that gets it started. And over a period of not just of decades or centuries or millennia, but millions of years are involved in making these living rocks. And we think they're there for us to take and use for new purposes that we have dreamed up. Just think about it and be among those who use your power, use your voice. We don't need to disrupt the ancient systems in the bottom of the sea. We don't need to take on an industrial scale wildlife. It's another form of mining the ocean of life. And we are paying the consequences. It's the carbon cycle. I mean, economists follow the money. Climate scientists follow the carbon. Where does it take you? Into the ocean. Now, I have met squid on their own terms. This is Monterey Bay, the place where one of those first marine protected areas was first. I thought that was moving. Anyway, there it is, a little squid. If you see them on their own terms, it's different than when you see them on a plate. When you understand that they are part of what makes the carbon cycle function, they're the middlemen. Many creatures that cannot get to the phytoplankton, can't even get to the zooplankton, can get to these little guys that have consumed either zooplankton or smaller creatures and make it possible for the large animals to exist. Well, we on the planet are large animals. We eat other animals, or we eat plants. We are omnivorous. That's a good thing. It means we have choices. Sharks don't. They have to eat what's there. We're not on their menu, although I was told I had to watch out for the man-eating sharks, and then I stopped worrying because it's man-eating sharks. No problem. But now we have to worry about man eating sharks, or at least their fins. We are such strange creatures in our habits. If we really step back, as many of you have, and looked at the questions, who are we? Where did we come from? What's it take to keep us alive? With 500 million people back in 1500s, 1 billion people in 1800, 2 billion by the 1930s, 4 billion by 1980, and here we are, 8 billion people. What's it going to take to keep us alive? Can we afford to sacrifice animals in the sea by the ton? Take them not just for dinner, take them not just for our sustenance, take them not on a level that might recover from what we actually need, to a level that it exterminates them and helps take a bite out of our future as well. With whales, it used to be about whales as products. Whales for pounds of meat, barrels of oil, whales by the ton. And really, on our watch, my watch, not all of you have been around to see the transition from looking at whales as creatures with the biggest brains on the planet, bigger even than Dan Pauly's. I mean, really, he's got a really big brain. But sperm whales, what do they know? What could we learn from them once you've turned them into pounds of meat and barrels of oil? But we've stopped, for the most part. Some are still regarded as a source of food, but generally speaking, people who do have no connection historically to whales as products are now learning to love whales, to see the economic value alive that far exceeds the value of whales dead, and also see them as carbon-based units, if you will, capturing, holding carbon. And there's a value to that in today's world. International Monetary Fund kind of assigns a value of about $1 trillion to the standing number of whales for the carbon they hold. If it works for whales, why doesn't it also work for tunas? Why doesn't it work for krill or plankton or all of the creatures in the sea? It's part of the carbon cycle. When we want to protect the ocean, how much is enough? to enable tunas to survive, whales to survive, for us to survive. Is it 10%? That used to be the target. Is it 30%? That's the present target. Yahoo! Like, we have nations around the world committing now to at least 30% of the ocean, which is about what the Great Barrier Reef now has secured for a high level of protection, up from 3% in the 70s to where we are today. Is that enough? How much of your heart do you want to protect? A third? A half? Or do you really want to think of the ocean as the blue heart of the planet? It keeps us alive, keeps you alive, keeps me alive, keeps the future alive, and shouldn't we respect it all as if our lives depend on it? And yes, it helps to have special areas. It does, it's working. And we need to understand, what do we want out of the protection? What do we need out of that protection? On the land, about 15% of the natural areas currently are protected, and we're aiming for 30%. We don't protect national parks to have more birds to kill. But we are protecting the ocean with that rationale. We can have more fish if we protect the ocean. You save the ocean so we can kill more creatures. I get it. It works. But there are other values that we should also be considering. There is a value to live tuna, but currently our expectations are we need more tuna to take. And we'll get it if we protect the high seas. We'll get it if we have special areas that we protect. We'll have more tuna to kill. Right now, their numbers are at a shockingly low level as compared to when I sat in Washington as the chief scientist at NOAA and looked at the figures from the International Tuna Commission and wondered, what are we trying to do, exterminate them? Because we're doing a great job. 90% gone in the North Atlantic Ocean, and around the world, the pattern is the same. We are so good at killing, so good at waging war, putting billions, trillions into killing one another. And the technologies that we have applied, we're waging war on ourselves, we're basically waging war on the ocean. But it tastes good, it's great. We have a market for wildlife. It's the biggest wildlife trade on the planet. What we generally call seafood, which has changed enormously in my lifetime. It used to be what you could take locally. Now it's internationally. That's not a bad thing, international trade, but it is a bad thing when we don't account for the cost to nature. If we only look at one side of the balance sheet, selling tuna, selling swordfish, selling orange roughy that have never known humans in any indigenous time in our history. Only now, with the technology to find, capture, and market just about any living thing to someone, somewhere. We're not talking about, feeding your families, maintaining your culture, developing a peaceful relationship with the ocean. If only at our meetings where we have all of the stakeholders present, except those who may be on the table, but not at the table, the creatures that we eat without asking, who are you? How old are you? Where did you come from? What have you been eating that maybe I don't want in me? These creatures, 33,000 different kinds of fish, freshwater and marine together. Who asks, where did you come from? How did you get to my plate? What is your life like? How do you spend your days and nights? I mean, I come as a witness. They can't be here to speak for themselves, so here I am as a spokesfish, just trying to share the view. I mean, of course, we will consume life from the land, wildlife, and cultivated creatures, and the same is true in the ocean. But we should be mindful and really be mindful of the costs of what we're taking that cannot be easily replenished, especially when we don't even know what's there in the first place. We take those minerals from the deep sea, what gets scooped up, taken with them? Whole systems, ecosystems, with diverse forms of life. When we take a fish out of the ocean, it's just something to eat, right? Except you've left a space. You've disrupted the continuity of ancient rhythms. It's one thing to do it, to be mindful, and to be appreciative. It's another simply to take on a scale where fish are measured by the ton. You don't even account for them as individuals, or squid, or oysters, or clams, or whatever it is that we just lump together as seafood. The biggest fish in the ocean, the whale shark, is no longer safe. It's had the ocean to, they have had the ocean to themselves for hundreds of millions of years, sharks and their relatives. We live in a special time when we, for the first time, can actually get down there. Jane Goodall with her chimpanzees, or other scientists who spend weeks, months, years getting to know snow leopards and lions and tigers. But here they are, the snow leopards and lions and tigers of the sea. And that's not all. Obviously, we have transformed their world, our world too. Many worry, and they should, about burning fossil fuels, about oil spills. There is a big cost to that, and we're getting pretty good about starting to evaluate that cost. But what about the other oil spill that we are just beginning to experience in the 20th and 21st centuries? Not something that our predecessors could or needed to worry about. What we're doing to change the chemistry of the planet through the products that we create that are not found anywhere in nature. It is, I know, I sympathize with the kids saying, problems are terrible. I sympathize with myself. I worry about what are we going to do with all this stuff that we've created and treated the ocean as the ultimate dump site, and now created problems that all of our neighbors, all of the other creatures are inheriting the problem that we have created. So, what to do? First of all, recognize that there are problems and there are solutions. I love this image of kids in Hong Kong waking up to the fun, to the joy, they're celebrating sharks. And their parents did not have the benefit of seeing sharks the way we now can through television, through various forms of media. We now know that unlike Jaws, where sharks were demonized, Peter Benchley himself, who wrote Jaws, spent the rest of his life trying to make it good with the sharks, trying to tell the world they're not bad, we're not on their menu. They're on our menu, but they should not be. We need sharks. We need songbirds, we need eagles, we need owls, we need lions and tigers, and we need sharks. There's some hope that in the very near future, the European Union may pass a law to really make the world safer for sharks. It's happening around the world. But why are we killing them at all? Why? We're terrestrial creatures. Well, actually, we're sea creatures. We need the ocean too. But the idea that we need sharks on the table? It seems a bizarre concept. It's a choice. We make lots of choices. What are we going to choose? Fortunately, we're making choices about octopuses. Although it's still on the menu in many places, the fact that octopus are beginning to touch the hearts as well as the minds of people for something more than something to eat. If you have not seen The Octopus Teacher, I urge you to do so. Look over the shoulder of Craig Foster, who spent, again, those scientists who spend long times getting to know animals on the land Craig Foster in South Africa got to know one octopus over a year, went to visit with that octopus day and night, and came away with a film that I think is transformative in terms of attitude people may have going forward about putting octopus on the menu. We don't need to eat so much wildlife from the sea. We need to think of it as wildlife. Okay, so it's edible, it's marketable, and yet there are other values. The carbon value, the ethical, moral responsibility that we have. With their decline comes our prosperity, but we aren't thinking about the ultimate cost until right about now, when we see that we're putting ourselves at risk as we put nature at risk. The trajectory that we now face right here at IMPAC5, where are we going to be by IMPAC6? Can we all commit individually and collectively to take to heart that we are burdened with laws, not just looking at illegal, unregulated, and unreported wildlife taken from the sea? I worry the most about the legal extraction, subsidized extraction of wildlife by the ton, thinking of it not as anything but a product. To think that, imagine, you know now, you do know, that life on Earth is mostly ocean life, and it keeps us alive. Look at the expectation of where we were a few years ago. Where are we now? I'm pleased to be helping to move the needle by encouraging people to identify places that they know and love and are willing to step up and do something, at least within their own countries, at least within their own neighborhood, at least within their own exclusive economic zones, but together to have hope spots that can become protected areas. It's wonderful to see organizations around the world in the last few decades moving toward protecting the ocean with concepts that really are focused on ocean life as wildlife, ecosystems, coral reefs, seagrasses, kelp forests, the deep sea, the high seas. It is the best chance we will ever have right now, this moment, this decade, this century, to change the trajectory of decline to one of recovery and protecting the last wild places. It's really refreshing to see leaders stepping up. President Bush, when he signed into law protection for the Papahanaumokuakea Marine Reserve in Hawaii, a fraction of 1% of the ocean was highly or fully protected. That trajectory, it's painful, but when you think about it in a geological way, we've made some progress since that time. President Obama quadrupled the size, and that moved the needle a bit. The Ross Sea, that happened the same year that President Obama magnified the Papahanaumokuakea Marine Reserve. Now we're looking at a high seas treaty. I mean, yes. I mean, are you with it? Can you do something? Are you little kids saying, I'm just one person, what can I do? Or are you looking in the mirror to say, I'm one person, and I can help. I can help bring the High Seas Treaty, the Biodiversity Treaty, to show that we respect life on Earth. Of course, it's for us, because if we don't, we're in serious trouble. But whatever the reason, this is the moment. I thank President Tommy Rumingasau, who's at this conference, for his leadership, one of the small island nations that has really taken bolder steps than most. Imagine if every country said, we'll take 80% of our exclusive economic zone and we'll safeguard that and we'll use the 20%, and maybe we can get this recipe right for how can we use nature without using nature up. How can we work with nature? How can we make peace with nature? How can we find a place for ourselves within the natural systems that make our existence possible? I'm encouraged because kids are celebrating prochlorococcus on t-shirts. That's cause for hope. Kids are getting out there the way their grandparents could not because the technology did not exist to take them under the sea, at least with a face mask and snorkel. And I hope, if you haven't already done so, take the plunge. At least snorkel. Go put your face in the blue heart of the planet. Swim around, look at the creatures who live there. And think about, what is the future we want? That's the big headline, right? That was the headline at Rio Plus 20 in 2012. What's the future we want? Here we are, 2023. What have we got from the future that was anticipated back then? We still have the best chance right now that we'll ever have. We still have about 10% of the sharks left. They're not all gone. You could say, oh, it's terrible, but there's plenty of reason for hope. You could say, oh, look at how the planet is warming, the carbon dioxide, and yeah, but you can still breathe. You're still here. We can still make a difference. What are we waiting for? You're not waiting. You're here at IMPAC5. I thank you for being here. I thank you for what you're going to do, whatever it is, so that the blue planet doesn't turn like that red one. We can do that if that's our goal. Is that the future we want? It's a question. It's right here, right now. We'll determine which planet we get. Thank you.